Hello and welcome to another nutrition coaching video. Today we're going to be talking all about carbohydrate. Carbohydrate just refers to varying lengths of sugar chains in our diet. It provides 4 calories per gram. It is important for many physiological functions, and I recommend to select the healthiest sources and incorporate in the amount you need across the day. I've got some examples here of carbohydrate containing foods. People often think of starchy carbs like bread, rice, and pasta, but the dominant macronutrient in many foods is carbohydrate, including lentils and legumes, in fruit, and in vegetables. These are essential for many reasons. Number one being energy. Our bodies get a lot of calories from carbohydrate and they enjoy using them. They're really good for exercise fueling, so we like to time them around your exercise sessions. Your brain and kidneys preferentially use carbohydrate as its main fuel source. If you don't give your body enough carbohydrate, it's just going to break down fat and protein into carbohydrate anyway, and then use that for your brain and kidneys. Another benefit of eating enough carbohydrate is that it may be muscle protein sparing. Like I said, if you don't eat enough carbs, your body will break down other fuel sources to turn them into carbohydrate. If you don't have enough carb, your body will break down protein and it may have to use your muscle protein to do this. So eating enough carbohydrate can actually be protective for your muscles and offer further benefits. This is the basic structure of a carbohydrate molecule. This is the most simple form, which is just a molecule of sugar. All carbohydrates are made from carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in different arrangements. That's why it's called a carbohydrate, because it's got carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. At their simplest form, carbohydrates are what we know of as sugar. This comes in many different forms due to its different arrangements. Longer chains of these sugar molecules become starches and fibers, but the simplest building block is sugar. The simplest form of sugar is otherwise known as a monosaccharide. Mono means one, saccharide means sugar. So this just means one sugar. Anything ending in ose is a sign that it's sugar. Glucose, fructose, galactose, for example. When you're looking at a label, if you see anything ending in ose, you know it's a different type of sugar or carbohydrate. This is just for context so you can actually understand more about your food, so that you can be educated in how food comes to be in the form that you eat and you won't be scared of eating it. So understanding that all carbohydrate is formed from sugar helps you not be scared of eating sugar or putting blanket rules on foods as good and bad. Here are some examples over here. Glucose is a monosaccharide and it's found naturally in fruits and vegetables and commonly found added in syrups, candy, sports drinks, and desserts. We also have fructose as an example of a monosaccharide, and the primary natural dietary source of fructose is fruit. All fruit contains fructose and glucose in different varying amounts. Galactose is the third monosaccharide we have in our diet. The main dietary source of galactose is actually in lactose. This is the sugar in milk and milk products such as cheese, butter, and yogurt. Moving on to disaccharides, this is slightly more complex than simple one molecule sugars, as it's now 2 sugars put together. So a single molecule plus another single molecule, these bonds link up and it becomes a slightly more complex carbohydrate. Disaccharide simply means 2 sugars. We have sucrose, which is glucose plus fructose. So that was 2 of those single monosaccharides put together. We have lactose, which is glucose plus galactose. And we have maltose, which is glucose and glucose put together. We then get to our more complex carbohydrates, which are known as polysaccharides. Poly means many, saccharide means sugar. So we're just talking about complex carbohydrates made up of many sugars. So you can see I've pictured that here with all those single molecules plus together. Some great examples we have here of polysaccharides are starch and fiber. Starch is broken down into glucose, which we use for energy. We find starch in things like bread, potatoes, rice, pasta, and they're the things people typically think of when they think of carbohydrate. The difference between starch and fiber is that we can break starch down in our bodies, whereas we actually can't break down fiber. This is the part of the plant-derived food, like fruit or vegetables, that the human digestive system cannot digest due to a lack of the necessary enzymes. Fiber is found in all plant foods. Although we can't break down fiber with our own body cells, it's actually broken down by our gut bacteria, which in turn produce something called short-chain fatty acids, which then provide energy for us. Because of this reduced absorption and the change in energy that we then absorb, fiber actually has 2 calories per gram instead of 4 calories per gram, like starches and sugars do. When it comes to carbohydrate-containing foods, I just want to remind you that just because a food has carbohydrate in it, doesn't make it just carb. Carbohydrate-containing foods also contain water and other macronutrients in varying amounts, which I've detailed here per 100 grams. At the top of the list here, we have plain table sugar, which is almost 100% carbohydrate, given that sugar, of course, is a carbohydrate. This decreases as we go down the list, and you'll notice that as we go down the list, the concentration of water increases. Things like vegetables and fruit are much lower in carbohydrate than dehydrated carbohydrate sources like rice or pasta or cereal. All the way down the bottom here, even though broccoli has most of its macronutrient content from carbohydrate, it only has 0.5 grams of carbohydrate. This is an example of why vegetables are so low calorie and why it's so important to eat enough of these if you are dieting or on lower calories, because it'll help you keep you fuller for less calories. I've also detailed potato down the bottom there because people like to demonize potato a lot when it comes to dieting or nutrition, but there's only 10 grams of carbohydrate per 100 grams, and this is due to the fact that there is a high amount of water in the food itself. And when we compare that to something like rice or pasta, there's 1/6 or 1/7 the amount of carbohydrate. The only problem with potato that I see is when it's just in the deep fried version from McDonald's. Otherwise, please feel free to include potato in your regular diet. It is so good for you. When you're setting carbohydrate in your macronutrients, when it comes to setting your own carbohydrate level, don't forget protein was most important. You have to set your protein first, and I recommend a range of 1.6 to 2.5 grams per kilo body weight. After this, you need to set your fat, which is on a sliding scale depending on your preferences and your individual circumstances. I detailed all of this in the fat coaching video, but just as a recap, fat should be set at a very minimum of 0.5 grams per kilo body weight and up to 1.2 grams per kilo body weight. After you've worked out these 2 macronutrients, the leftover calories are used for your carbohydrate. The maths for this is actually quite simple. Whatever your leftover calories is, simply divide it by 4 and that'll give you grams of carbohydrate, because remember that carbohydrate has 4 calories per gram. Keep in mind that carbs and fat are on a sliding scale. You can have a range for this and it can change daily. So if one day your fat is higher, your carbohydrate will be lower to meet your calories. And vice versa. If one day fat is lower, carbohydrate will be higher to meet your calories. If you are more active and one of your goals is to build muscle and support your training needs, then you may be better off with a lower fat intake and a higher carbohydrate intake. Again, this is all just for context and extra information for you. Don't stress too much about the details because I've done this for you as a nutrition coaching client. Check the front page of your flexible diet plan if you're not sure how many grams of carbs you should be having each day. And to recap, the calories in food come from the macronutrients. Carbohydrate provides 4 calories per gram. The building blocks of carbohydrates are sugar. Long chains of sugar become more complex carbohydrates such as fiber and starch. Carb-containing foods still contain other nutrients and water. 100 grams of fruit is not 100 grams of carbs. I recommend to pick the less dense options, especially vegetables when dieting, and work out your carbs last after you prioritize your protein and fat first. As always, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need any more help with any of the concepts discussed in this coaching video, and thank you for watching.